Hello everyone, welcome back to We Heart Therapy. You're watching the series Your Guide to Therapy and Coaching, and I'm your host, Anabelle Bugatti. Today we're talking about high conflict personalities, along with high conflict divorce and high conflict couples counseling. We have a specialist with us today. Her name is Donna Wilburn. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist here in Las Vegas, Nevada, and she's going to talk to us about handling high conflict couples and divorce. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Glad to be here.
So let's talk to our viewers a little bit more about, let's define a little bit, what does high conflict mean?
So a high conflict personality is somebody that might be kind of insecure. They tend to be reactive, emotionally intense, maybe easily offended, kind of a fragile ego. So a high conflict personality, when in a relationship, tends to contribute a lot of intensity to that relationship. So that's why they call it high conflict relationships.
So in this relationship, the couple is likely always fighting a lot?
Yeah, what happens is because we're human, we tend to hurt other people's feelings and offend accidentally. When you're with someone who has a high conflict personality, the reaction is so intense that the person on the other side gets extremely defensive. So then you have an intensely hurt person with an intensely defensive person, and that is just a bomb waiting to explode.
So if couples come in, and they are decided that they're going to get a divorce, but they're high conflict, can you first maybe share why it's important for couples who are going through a divorce, especially high conflict, to see somebody during the process?
Well, going through divorce is going to bring up the insecurities and the anxiety that comes with separating your family. There's a grieving process that has to happen. There could be children involved. A lot of parents might get anxious or insecure when the other parent is parenting. So what happens is when the divorce process kicks in, the high conflict personality intensifies, okay? And in that process, as part of that intensity, they can accidentally harm their child. They can psychologically abuse their child. The arguments and conflict can get really, really hurtful, okay? So if a couple comes into me and wants to work on getting a divorce and going through that process with as less conflict as they can, I can help give them guidelines on how to react to something that the other person might say, how to communicate that you're bothered by something in a way that doesn't attack that other person, how to communicate with the children about what's going on, because a high conflict personality might either give the children too much information or give them too much emotion, and then the child then feels a loyalty bind and feels pulled to be on one parent's team or the other parent's team. So if they come in ahead of time and talk to me about how to go through this process, I can give them guidelines that will really let the process be much more streamlined than it would have been if they didn't come in.
And you help them sort of learn how to work through the conflict. And I know sometimes with the high conflict folks, sometimes the hurt person often instigates some of the trouble just because they're so hurt and they're angry and they lash out. And then the children end up becoming sort of chess pieces, like used against the other person. They call it parental alienation.
Yeah.
So this process can help prevent such things from happening.
It can, and right now my reputation in town is the most aggressive, I'd have to say, regarding going to court for cases where there could be parental alienation in there. So if we can help these families early on, they can possibly avoid many, many years and thousands of dollars of court fees and attorney fees, because I'm there at the end also. When these children have been triangulated into these families and a child is in hater mode and not wanting to see their other parent, they bring me in. And the consequence for that is that you lose time with your child if you cannot stop influencing them or triangulating them because you're so hurt and cannot grieve. You'll lose time with your child.
Right. And so there's a cost, is what you're saying, that if couples can't learn to get along and can't learn to be civil with each other, there's a cost not only financially because it's going to cost more court and attorney fees and trying to iron things out, but also you could actually lose time with your child because of the psychological, emotional harm that could come to them.
That is true. I have had to advise that a child be with their parent only if they're supervised. I've had to advise that a child have no contact with a parent for a certain amount of time to overcome the influence of that hurt person. So time, money, you can save so much if you go get help regarding the divorce process. And if you have a high conflict personality, it's not a bad thing. It means you're intense, it means you're passionate, it means you're sensitive, and those are good things. But when insecure or anxious or angry, those qualities can be very harmful to the people around you, including your children.
Yes. So can we talk a little bit more about the impact on the children? I know a lot of parents don't tend to see the bigger picture as to how what's happening right here, and how if we sort of poison our child against our other spouse through a divorce, how that affects them. But you know, then these kids end up growing up with the wrong story about the other parent and keeping them from a relationship with that spouse. Can you talk more about that, Harm?
I can, because there's actually a lot of research out there about adult children of alienation and how they were affected early on and how it affected them later in life. So as an MFT, our focus is on relationships and how a person's relationship develops even early on. They will develop relationship habits even early on. So if you alienate a child or influence a child against their other parent, you are damaging how they will have relationships in their future. Even as adults, they will be influenced. They will not be able to attach correctly. They will not be able to have a healthy relationship with someone. If they go through a divorce process, they're more likely to behave in this manner also. Plus, what happens is later on, when they grow up and they're about between 25 and 30 years old and having their own family, they realize that that parent gave them information that was not appropriate, and that parent made them angry at their other parent or see their other parent as a monster. And the resentment that they have towards the parent that did that can be very intense. And you might not lose your child now because you're alienating or triangulating them, but you will lose them later. They will be very angry.
And so let's talk about some of the damage that occurs up front. What are some of the symptoms that parents might see in their children now while they're going through the process that shows that they're not coping well with this?
Okay, so that's how we find out that something's going on between parents, is by looking at the child. So when I'm working with someone, if you hear things, for instance, I had one the other day using the term we. It's, we don't like that dad gets so angry. And I go, who's we? It's me and mom. So you see an alignment happen. Now we're a team. Now we're a team, us against you. So that's a sign. Hater mode, which is like, I hate that parent. I don't want anything to do with them. I don't even want to call them dad. They stop calling them by their name, by their title. They want to call their parent by their first name. That's called attachment suppression, and that means they are actually trying to remove that parent out of their life. And healthy children, you can be a horrible parent and you can be angry at your child, and a child without influence will still want that parent, and they will still want to call him mom, they will still want to call him dad. But if you see a child going, I hate them, I don't want anything to do with them, I wish they were dead, I wish they were out of my life, don't want to talk to them ever again, those are signs that there's something else influencing their view of their parent, and typically it's the other parent.
And they may also act up in school, suddenly do poorly in their grades, maybe bully other children.
Because what happens, it causes a lot of stress. Hating on a parent brings a lot of shame to that child. Internally, they know they should not be doing this. So it causes a lot of internal stress. And internal stress over time, they're going to act in a certain way and take that out on somebody.
Get some anger issues, some major anger issues with kids. Some parents,
they do. Or anxiety. A lot of intense anxiety is what I see in that.
So a lot of worry, and sometimes, so you'll see kids start to really worry about everything. That's sort of the way that they start coping with how their world seems suddenly out of control with the parental issues. But then you also see anger issues starting to come up. A kid that was always so nice and wonderful, now suddenly they're so angry at home, and they're always, short, and
It is. It can be really intense, but know that that's an extremely unhealthy state for a child to be in. it is not natural for them to hate their other parent. And even if that parent makes so many mistakes, has so many bad habits, a child still needs to see them as a good person, at least up until they're a teenager, because that child needs to attach to that parent.
Right.
And if you make them fear or hate that parent, they won't attach to them.
Right. They need to see them as the parent who loves them.
Yes, they do. I say it's like Santa Claus. If you wouldn't say it about Santa Claus, don't say it about the other parent.
Right.
Let them believe they're good, even if you know as the co-parent that they're not that great, that they have really bad habits. Let your child think they're Santa Claus, because they need to right now.
Yeah. So as a therapist who specializes in this type of clientele, you'll help couples learn how to co-parent more civilly together and avoid, hopefully, some attorney's fees and long-term psychological damage to their children.
That would be
but
great.
you also do appear in court. So
I do.
Talk to us about that process.
So I am on a list of what's called forensic providers, and if a judge or attorneys feel that a child is being triangulated to the point where that child refuses to even spend time with their parent, they will call me in to evaluate and assess the case, and then I will have to go into court to testify. And if I have a parent who is doing that, I will have to say that parent is influencing that child, and as a result that parent might lose time with that child. But I have to put the child's best interest first, and if there is damage going on, I have to try to minimize that damage. And if the parent refuses to change their way or to help their child by avoiding influencing them, then I have to have some severe consequences, and there are severe consequences for that.
Yeah. So it sounds like overall this is extremely important work, not only to teach the parents how to get along, at least, for the kids, but to also prevent financial costs and long-term harm to the children in the family unit. And research has shown us that children whose parents divorce, if the parents are amicable and get along, they can be well adjusted, versus kids whose parents break up and they're miserable, or even kids whose parents stay together and they're fighting all the time. It's that fighting all the time that really has the huge impact on the children.
It is, and studies show that, like you said, it's not the divorce that traumatizes children or negatively affects them. It's how the parents handle the divorce and the parent conflict after divorce that really affects how the children experience their world and the stress that they experience.
Yes, so this is very important work. If you are a high conflict couple or high conflict personalities going through a divorce, it would be really in your best interest to seek out a skilled therapist who is knowledgeable in this area and trained in this area and can help you through this process. Now, if there's folks who aren't in Las Vegas, how can they find a therapist who specializes in high conflict couples?
It's actually really challenging, but the folks that are aware of specialists typically tend to be attorneys and other folks who have high conflict personalities. You can try to do some research regarding specializing in high conflict divorce, but right now it's kind of a blooming market. It's not really out there just yet, so there's not really a lot that have the experience to handle two possible personality disorders in a room together.
Right. So maybe they could just do a Google search and type in therapists who specialize in this in their area. Maybe consult their attorney if they're working with an attorney, if they know of a therapist who could work with. And if they're in Las Vegas and they'd like to work with you, how can they find you?
Well, my website is www.donnawilburn.com. You can find me on Psychology Today looking for Donna Wilburn. My phone number you can use is 702-234-9325. I do Skype and FaceTime, and if I needed to consult out of state, I can. So if you do have a relationship where there's a high conflict personality or the child is showing signs of being influenced maybe by a high conflict personality, then whether in state or out of state, I'd at least ask. I'm willing to talk to or help or help you find somebody. Absolutely.
Excellent. So if you're in Las Vegas, look up Donna Wilburn. If you're out of the area, Google search, or Psychology Today is another effective tool to help you find somebody to work with. Thank you again so much for joining us today. Thank you to our viewers for staying tuned, and make sure that you hit subscribe because more episodes are on the way.